responds with compassion. And so she draws him out of the water. That's how he got his name, Moses, drawn out of the water. I'm going to talk about his name in another session because there's a lot there. So he's drawn out of the water, and Miriam comes and says, hey, I know who can nurse this kid. And so mom gets paid to nurse her own child. Only God can get you paid to do your motherly duty. And so that's what happened. So he grows up, and he goes in, so he's weaned, so he's probably like 2 or 3, maybe a little bit older, and it's because they took longer to wean. And so then he goes into Pharaoh's house, and he's raised as the grandson of the Pharaoh. He comes to be an adult, and he sees his brothers being whipped, being punished, and Moses is not having any of that. So what does he do? I love that the Bible put this little detail in because it's so real. It says he looked left and right to see if anybody was around, right? No, that detail, you didn't need it, but it's nice to have. So he knew what he was doing was wrong. He was like, I guess nobody's here. And then he goes, kills the guy, and then it hides him in the sand. And, probably not the best place, to hide him. There's probably other places. I would have put him in the Nile so he could get eaten by crocodiles, and he wouldn't get caught. But no, he left him in the sand. And so he comes back the next day. He's like, well, I'm going to be the hero to these people. And he sees them fighting amongst each other. And they're like, and Moses is like, hey, what are y'all fighting about? You're all brothers. You need to love each other. And they say, oh, what are you going to do? You going to kill me too? Big man? Got that energy. You going to kill me too, huh? And Moses' response was, wait a second. Y'all know I killed the guy? If y'all know, that means Pharaoh's going to know. And if he knows, I'm done for. And so he flees. And he was right. Pharaoh certainly wanted him dead. And so he fled. And he went into the desert. And he went into Midian. And he goes into Midian. And this is what happens. I said Genesis. I am so sorry. I just didn't do a good job. Here is actually Exodus. Again, Exodus 2, verse 16, right? It says, now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came to draw water and filled the troughs of water to their father's flock. Then the shepherds came and drove them away, but Moses stood up and helped them and watered their flock. Okay, so he's at the well. What does that mean? Think about well scenes in the Genesis. They went to wells. What happened after going to the well? Yes, they got married. The servant went to the well and met Rebecca, and then Isaac went to the well. Not Isaac, and then Jacob went to the well, right? Going to the well means a marriage is about to happen. You can Google this, well motif. It's like all over the internet. It's like the most basic motif. If you ask what a motif is in the Bible, this is the first example that everybody gives. It's that common. It is established. If you see a man meet a woman at a well, that means marriage is about to happen. Jesus meets the Samaritan woman at the well. But she's been married 7 times. They play with the story. And so what you're supposed to do when you read the story of the woman at the well, you're supposed to meditate on all these other stories. And what you do, this is really tedious, but put all the well stories scene by scene and look for similarities and differences, and you can find meaning in the differences. And then when you get to Jesus, right, you look for the similarities, look for the differences, and then you start to see, okay, what are the biblical authors trying to communicate? It's tedious. You got to make this big old grid, and the servant went, or the person went, he lifted the rock, or he fed the waters, or she brought the water to him, or whatever, and you look for those differences, and you start seeing things. Things starts to come to you. We do this all the time in movies, right? Like, what's a common trope in a movie? Let's say it's like a really bad rom-com, and the 2 lovers have a falling out, and then the guy has that moment like, oh my God, I do love the girl. And then he runs to the airport, right? Or he runs to this place to go meet her. That is so common. Everybody knows exactly what I'm talking about. It's so common. You all know exactly what I'm talking about. And so a good producer is going to turn that upside down. He's going to run off to the airport. And he's like, he sees the plane flying off. And the camera pans, and your anticipation is building, and you look to see she's not there. She's on the plane. And you see a time skip. It's been 5 years. And you read a newspaper article, and you find out that the plane that she was on actually crashed. It's subverting the idea, right? Hold on. And so he goes to the funeral, and he meets the love of his life at the funeral, right? He meets somebody else, and then some happy after. But the point is, you're playing with the idea. You set yourself up for this expectation, and then something else happens. That's called storytelling. You lead them to believe that this is going to happen, and then you do something different. Or you do the same thing. That's fine. But that's storytelling. That's what's happening here. This is what Moses is doing. He's trained you to expect the story to go a certain way. You get to hear. And so without even reading the rest of the story, you already know Moses is about to get married. And what happens? He gets married. He marries Zipporah. But the one thing I want to point out from Exodus 2, one more thing, and then I'm going to move on to Exodus 3, is that when they introduce him to the father, do you know what she says? This Egyptian man saved me. I was saved by this Egyptian man. What is Moses? Is he Hebrew? Is he Egyptian? And then, do you want to complicate it even further? He spends 40 years in Midian. So what is he? Is he Hebrew? Is he Egyptian? Is he a Midianite? And I'm going to telegraph a little bit for you. When he's called of God, the very first thing, when God calls him, the very first objection he has is, who am I? He has been between cultures. He's so unsure of his own identity, he can't even do what God has called him to do. If you're not confident in who you are, if you're not sure in your identity, it's going to be a barrier to doing what it is that God has called you to do. And thankfully for us, our sureness comes from being in Christ. We have this new life in him. And as we embrace this new life and we're becoming who we are and becoming like him, and Christ is formed in us, that reality needs to be the very thing that gives us the confidence. It's not that I'm Egyptian or I'm Jewish or I'm a Midianite. I'm not any of those things. I'm a child of God. And because I'm his, I know through him I can. Moses struggled with his identity. It was a tough battle for him. And I love that the Bible takes some time to explore that, because it makes it feel so real. He's in between worlds. He's Egyptian. And that question, that introduction, how much did that sting for Moses? He was introduced as an Egyptian and he's only in this situation because he killed an Egyptian to save what he considered his brothers. And so he took a stand as a Jew, but is known as an Egyptian. That had to hurt him. He had to feel conflicted. He said, why did I give up the life that I was living if all I am is an Egyptian? It was challenging for Moses, I'm sure. Had to have been a tough time. But what's interesting, I'll save it. Okay, so Exodus 3. So the story's moving along. Story is going quick, by the way. By the time you get to Exodus 3, it's been round about 80 years or so. Right? time is flying because Moses dies at 120. It says that he was in the wilderness for 40 years with the Israelites. He was in Midian for 40 years. So that means by the time you get to chapter 3, very close to 80 years have passed. We've covered 80 years in 2 chapters. The time is flying. That's another technique that you should pay attention to. Pay attention to when things slow down. And you'll notice that when they're dealing with the plagues and coming out of Israel, that covers so many chapters, even though way less time is passing. When the biblical authors do that, they're trying to show you what they really think is important. His calling is important, but this deliverance out of Egypt is like super key, and you need to be focused right here. In fact, you know what's crazy is how much time they spend at Mount Sinai, and how many chapters they devote to them being at Sinai. A lot. Well, we'll talk about that in future lessons. But the biblical authors devote a lot of time to being at Sinai. And so in that part of the Torah, the 2 most important events was coming out of Egypt and going in the covenant. These 2 things shaped the people of Israel more than anything else, coming out of Egypt and going into covenant. We know that just by how the author uses time. Okay. So, summary of chapter 3. Moses is shepherding and he's going about. He's on the west side of the mountain, of the desert of Horeb, and he sees this bush and it's burning, but it's not being burnt to a crisp. And he is baffled. I mean, brother is confused. He said, this is a wonder, and I have to investigate. I'm curious. And when he looks at the bush, and God looks at him, and he looks at God, and God looks at him. They lock eyes. And then God speaks, all right? God didn't speak as he was passing by. There would be a locking of eyes. They locked eyes. I mean, metaphorically, because it was just fire. And so, but he locked eyes with God, and then God began to speak. And so he tells them, hey, you're going to deliver your people. In the latter half of Exodus 3 and the beginning part of Exodus 4 is just Moses complaining about how he can't do it. He spends 2 halves of different chapters complaining about how he can't do it. Okay, let's look at a couple things in particular. I want to address an argument real quick. In Exodus 3, see, I fixed it now, so I don't have Genesis anymore. I got my act together. Look at this, Exodus 3, verse 2. The angel of the Lord appeared to him in a burning bush, to him in a blazing fire from amidst the bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush was burning with fire, yet the bush was not consumed. So Moses said, I must turn aside now to see this marvelous sight while the bush is not burned up. And so he's thoroughly excited. This is interesting. He's a nature lover, I suppose. And when the Lord saw that he looked aside, God called to him from the bush. Okay. Who spoke to him from the bush? Verse 4 says God spoke. Verse 2 says the angel of the Lord. So who spoke? Was it the angel of the Lord? Was it God? Was it angel of the Lord? Or was it Yahweh? What's happening? Can I tell you what the Trinitarians do? They were like, this is one of those cool moments where we start to see like the multiplicity of God. And like we're seeing God like there's a distinct person who's not quite God but is God. And they start to make that argument. They do that here. It's like the commander of the Lord's host that Joshua meets. They're like, that's another one of those, right? It's like that kind of situation. Or there's a specific angel called the angel of Yahweh. He said, this one is God, but he's not God. And we start seeing the breadcrumbs for what will become the Trinity. And I'm like, bro, y'all trying real hard. Y'all too deep. Y'all making it way too deep, okay? For a ton of reasons. I'll say this. I think there's two better ways to read that than just from the text, looking at the text. One, either it is just the angel of the Lord, which is a specific angel who's representing God. And him speaking on behalf of God is a legitimate way you could say God spoke. In the same way, when it says, he says to Moses, I saw my people crying, so I'm going to come down and deliver them. But who goes and do all the miracles? Is God through Moses. And so there's a convention where a legitimate representative can be referred to as God, but still be a representative. Moses, if you read through Exodus, the line between Moses and Yahweh is blurred often. It will say Moses did this, and then a couple of verses later, it will say Yahweh did this. Well, who did it? Well, he's his representative. And no one would ever interpret to think that Moses is God, right? And so either the angel of the Lord is a legitimate representative. I think another interpretation that's possible is that this is what we will call a theophany. That's another possibility, is that this is a specific manifestation for a particular time akin to the pillar of fire or the pillar of cloud, right? These are particular manifestations in the Old Testament for a specific reason, right? I think either one of those make much more internal sense than the breadcrumbs theory of a possible Trinity or something like that, right? So I wanted you to be aware of this because they like to use these verses for that, and that's not what's happening there. Moses talking, look at this. I said Genesis again. I'm tripping. Exodus 3, verse 8. So I have come down to deliver them from the power of the Egyptians. Just the first part of that verse. That blurring of lines between Moses and God, this is Moses fulfilling our original purpose. Genesis chapter 1 says that we were created in his image, for his images, to do what? Be blessed, to be fruitful, multiply, and to rule. And so the description of the Selim, or the image that we see in Genesis 1, is a description of humanity partnering with God with power and authority, ruling over the cosmos. And what does Moses do? He has power over the elements and power over natural forces. He has become the Genesis 1 image. You're supposed to be reading this and be like, oh my goodness, here it is. This is an image of God. We saw it in Joseph. When people are yielding to God and they're being the image of God, we see that the world is blessed and deliverance happens. We saw it in Joseph, and now we're going to see it again in Moses. But the shocking twist is Joseph had perfect obedience every time. We see Moses, this new image, Moses. Guess what we see about Moses? This new image of God. His first chance at being commissioned to be an image, what does he do? 5 times he rejects the call to be the image of God. 5 times. He says, who am I? I can't do it. I'm a nobody. I don't even know who I am. I don't even know my own identity. How does God respond? I'll be with you. If you're struggling with your identity, you don't find it in yourself, you find it in him. The next objection that he has is, well, who are you? Who do you say that I am? Well, I'm going to go do this and tell these people about you. Who do I tell them that you are? I will be who I will be. I am that I am. Whatever the need is, that is what I shall be. If you're worried about who God is and you're struggling to trust him, know that he is your everything to every need and situation that you find yourself in. He goes on to say, but what if I just can't get the confidence of the people. They won't believe me. I tried to